In 1930, a man walked into a village he had visited dozens of times before. Meals were still on the tables. Clothes were still hanging on the lines. But every single person was gone.
Let's unfold the dark. Northern Canada, the winter of 1930. This is a place where the cold doesn't just bite, it kills. Temperatures drop so low that breath freezes before it leaves your lips. In this frozen landscape, there was a small Inuit village near a place called Lake Anjikuni. It wasn't on any official map, but the people who lived there, about 30 men, women, and children in the core camp, with a wider community of over 1,200 spread across the region, had lived here for generations. They hunted, they fished, they survived, and they were known to the fur trappers who passed through the area every season. One of those trappers was a man named Joe Labelle. He was a seasoned traveler, someone who knew the land, knew the people, and knew when something was wrong. For a man like Labelle, the approach to a settlement was usually predictable. Smoke from a cooking fire, dogs calling from outside a shelter, the movement of people preparing for the day. These were the small signs that told a traveler he had reached a living camp. But the closer he came to this village, the more the silence stood out. There was no ordinary activity, no voices carried across the snow. No one came to meet him. The scene looked quiet at first, yet it was the wrong kind of quiet, the kind that makes a familiar place feel suddenly unfamiliar. And when Labelle began looking more closely, the mystery of Lake Anjikuni was only beginning. But here's where it gets strange. When the RCMP arrived and began their search of the surrounding area, they found the village sled dogs. They were tethered to trees near the village, buried under a snowdrift. Every single one of them, dead. Not killed by predators, not injured. They had died of starvation. Think about that. These were sled dogs, trained, loyal animals. They were tethered, which means someone tied them there. But then, nobody came back to feed them. Nobody came back at all. The dogs waited. And waited. And starved. If the villagers had left voluntarily, they would have taken their dogs. If they'd been attacked, the dogs would have been loose, scattered, or killed violently. But this was something else entirely. But the most disturbing discovery was still ahead. The RCMP searched the village burial ground, a sacred place where the community laid their dead to rest. In any community, a burial ground is more than earth and stone. It is a record of the people who came before. It is supposed to remain untouched. But when the officers reached the site, something was immediately wrong. Every single grave had been opened. The earth had been disturbed. The remains were gone. Not just one grave, all of them. And this wasn't the work of animals. The graves were undamaged in a way that suggested careful, deliberate removal. There were no random trails through the cemetery, no scattered bones, no signs of a feeding animal or a collapsed embankment. Whoever opened those graves had known exactly where to dig and had taken the dead away. And remember, this was in sub-zero temperatures. The ground in northern Canada during winter is frozen solid. Digging into it requires serious effort, serious tools, and serious time. This was not something done casually. It would have taken planning, strength, and hours of work in the darkness. So who or what had the time, the ability, and the reason to open every grave and remove the dead, while simultaneously making the living disappear? The officers had arrived expecting answers. Instead, they found a second mystery buried beneath the first. A village emptied of its people was horrifying enough, but a burial ground emptied of its dead suggested a deliberate act carried out in frozen darkness for a reason that remained completely unknown. And that question would haunt the investigation for years to come. Over the decades, many theories have tried to explain what happened at Lake Anjikuni. Let's walk through them carefully. The first theory is mass migration. Some suggested the village simply moved. Harsh winter, declining resources, maybe they packed up and left. At first, that might sound possible, but this doesn't hold up. They left behind food, weapons, and their dogs. No community, especially not a survival-savvy Inuit one, would abandon the essentials of life. And no neighboring settlement reported an influx of people. The second theory is disease. Could a disease have wiped them out? No bodies were ever found. Not in the village, not in the surrounding forest, not anywhere. If disease had killed them, there would be remains. There were none. The third theory is an attack or massacre. An attack by a hostile group? There were no signs of violence. No blood, no evidence of weapons being used, and again, no bodies. An attack leaves traces. This left nothing. And then there are the stranger theories. Some witnesses in the area reported seeing unusual lights in the sky around the time of the disappearance. Strange, moving lights that didn't behave like anything natural. Local Inuit legends speak of spirits that collect souls from time to time. Ancient forces that take people without a trace. And here's a detail that doesn't get talked about enough. The opened graves. Whatever happened didn't just take the living. It took the dead, too. What kind of force? Natural or otherwise, would do that. The theories become more disturbing the closer we look. Each ordinary explanation fails against the same unanswered facts. The village was empty, the dogs were dead, and the graves had been opened. The mystery remains. The RCMP eventually closed the case. The official explanation? The story was exaggerated. Some officials even suggested it was fabricated. But Joe Labelle was a known, respected trapper. He had no reason to lie. And the details he reported? The untouched belongings, the starving dogs, the opened graves, were too specific, too consistent to simply invent. Today, nearly a century later, Lake Anjikuni is still out there, still frozen, still silent. And the question remains, what happened to those people? What do you think happened at Lake Anjikuni? Was it a natural event we still can't explain? Something more sinister? Or something we don't have a word for yet? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one. If this story kept you up, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell, because the next one is even darker. Let's unfold the